2000s would
Hey man, man, it's your boy.
see individuals branching off, forming new alliances.
AK Mr. Nemper Boy Match and today, man. So we back with No Limit, Chicago Deadliest gang. I think this is part 3. Yeah, this is part 3, man. Like, subscribe, share, man. Let's get into the video.
And breaking free of the past as new feuds emerged between members from varying sets. For example, you've got the likes of Rio, hailing from Pocket Town, but also affiliated with KTS. One individual who played a role in early feuds related to Pocket Town goes by the name of Lil Pez, or Paris. He was murdered just age 16 in Grand Crossing in March 2008, being found with
Damn, only 16? He didn't even get to make it to graduation. Or seen the age of 18. 16 is nah. 2008. How old would he be? He was alive now. Is this so you done when you're 16? Maybe like 30s? Late 20s, early 30s.
Gunshot wound to the head on the sidewalk of the 1300 block of East 72nd Street around 11 p.m. His sister would tell the news that she'd feared her brother had fallen in with local gangs, with it being believed that Lil Pez had formed links with gang members in both Lakeside and Pocket Town, with it being believed that his killing marked a significant escalation in tension in the area. So by 2008, we have the likes of the Muskegon Boys and No Limit warring with the Lakeside GDs, or KTS, as well as former Peace Stones based in Pocket Town. But there's just one more piece to this complicated puzzle, because there's yet one more significant group famous for being constantly at war with No Limit. A set of gangsters based in the north of Terrortown, descending from the original Black Peace Stones, who go by the name of Black Mob.
Oh damn. So he used to be what, No Limit? Crazy. Murdered Vito.
In the north of Terrortown, there's a territory controlled by a group called Black Mob, based on 74th to 75th and Phillips, only a few blocks north of 79th where No Limit call home. One of the most famous and feared names from Black Mob is Shooter Shells. Much like Mad Max, Shooter Shells had allegedly played a role in numerous killings as part of this feud, apparently cultivating a fearsome reputation in the streets. But we'll learn more about him later in the story. Black Mob is a set branching off from the original Peace Stones, descending from Jeff Fort, who claimed Terrortown since the early 90s. It's said that over the years following the large busts on the original Peace Stone leadership that descended from Jeff Fort, Black Mob in the north would continue on the Peace Stone legacy, controlling the drug trade in the area. But as renegade Peace Stone sets like No Limit formed, for a period these newer sets would be expected to pay a tax to the original generation of Black Peace Stones, Black Mob in the north. Essentially, if these new, younger No Limit gangsters wanted to sell drugs in Terrortown, they would have to pay the OGs from Black Mob. And as you can probably imagine, that is where tension started. It's said that at some point in the 90s, former leader of No Limit, G Bull, was killed, though there's very little information online about that particular incident. But what we do know is that into the noughties, a new leadership figure for the No Limit troops emerged, a man known as Hellrail, aka G-Rail, or Rugotti, not to be confused with another Hellrail from Lakeside, who we'll discuss later in this story. Up until this point, Black Mob and No Limit had been historically friendly, but soon a turf war would break out between these two factions. A No Limit member by the name of Vito had allegedly been selling drugs in Black Mob turf. He was ultimately attacked for not paying tax or showing respect to the elder Peace Stones controlling that area. Retaliation from No Limit would soon follow, and story has it that Vito would attempt to shoot up an enemy from Black Mob, unsuccessfully attempting to kill them with their family present. And this reckless act of disrespect would apparently—
Shooting with their family present? Yeah. Oh, that is crazy. Hold on. Give me a sip real quick. Alright, y'all.
Apparently sparked the bitter war between Black Mob and No Limit. Eventually, on the 27th of April 2009, Vito, real name Divas Johnson, would be murdered in the street in Terrortown. After apparently being confronted on the street about the disrespect, Vito was allegedly shot 5 times in front of a large crowd. Police were called to the scene of the shooting at around 1:20 in the morning, attending the 7800 block of South Essex, where they found Vito with—
Hey man, I feel like this could have been all avoided if they just pay taxes and respect and all that. That's all you gotta do, man. Then that's come with the, like, if you're trying to sell someone to territory, man, at least like, pay taxes and all that. You know what I mean? But I mean, it is what it is, man. Cause with the life, it's come with this life, man.
With gunshot wounds in his chest, just a few blocks from his home, and he would sadly be pronounced dead by 2:18 AM. Vito's killer went by the name of Boo from Black Mob. real name Trinity Walton, he was charged with the killing of Vito, ultimately getting 60 years in prison.
Damn.
The loss of Vito hit No Limit members hard, and surviving members would regularly bring him up in conversation and in songs. G Herbo would rap on his computer's freestyle that he drops the 5 for Vito, a reference to doing a downward 5-finger hand sign as a mark of disrespect to the 5-point star that represents the early Black Peace Stone movement which Black Mob descended from. Dropping the 5s is essentially a peace stone killer hand sign. Showing respect for their fallen brother Vito would echo through everything the No Limit members did and said for years to come. Even many years later, when Lil Bibby signed Juice WRLD, he became so indoctrinated into the gang's way of talking, he'd regularly be seen on camera swearing on Vito's life in regular conversation.
On Vito, this nigga good. On Vito, this nigga getting paid.
The killing of Vito caused No Limit members to identify as BMK or Black Mob killers. And considering the separate beef going on with the gangster disciples from Lakeside, many No Limit members would also identify with the GDK or GD killer movement. In addition to dropping the 5, many would be seen in pictures doing the upside down pitchfork hand sign commonly associated with the GDK movement. And once again, upon signing to Lil Bibby, you might catch pop singer Juice WRLD throwing up GDK in numerous pictures too. And since this meant that No Limit members were beefing both Black Peace Stones and gangster disciples at the same time, many from No Limit would identify as EBK or Everybody Killers. Sadly, however, the murder of Vito was just the beginning of a long and bloody war between these groups, and in the decade plus that would follow, countless men from every corner and pocket of Terrortown would lose their lives to gun violence. And while not every killing in this story would be associated with these specific feuds, the sad truth is the young members growing up in Terrortown would be forced to witness death and destruction throughout their most formative years, no doubt having an incredibly detrimental effect on their mindsets and prospects for the future. The next tragedy would strike on July 2nd, 2009, when senior NLMB member James Robinson, aka J-Mo or Prince Chico, would be shot and killed around 10 PM near the 79th Street of Yates Avenue. He was found by police on the street with a bullet in his head. Prince Chico would be another of the names that would be sorely missed by the young members of No Limit. Just like Vito, G Herbo would go on to memorialize Chico in several of his songs, like the track East Side Story, where he would reminisce growing up around Vito, Hellrel, and Chico in the neighborhood. Fortunately, Herbo was one of the examples of a Terrortown native who was able to take what he witnessed in the streets and turn it into art. Sadly, many others wouldn't be so lucky, and to make matters worse, it wouldn't only be the ops that young men in Terrortown would have to fear, as many of the young teenagers in the area forced to carry weapons to defend themselves from potential rivals, hell-bent on shooting at them and taking their lives, as a result would unfortunately also face the prospect of the police shooting at them too. In April 2010, Zale, a beloved member of the Muskegon Boys, will become the latest young man in Terrortown to lose their life to gun violence. But in this case, instead of being shot by the ops, Zale would lose his life after a dramatic shootout with Chicago police. He was allegedly stopped by the cops at 10:30 PM, jumping out of the car and apparently opening fire. The police would return fire, striking Zale, real name Isaiel Jackson, eventually taking him into custody and taking his weapon. But sadly, his injuries would be too much, and he'd be pronounced dead at 1:45 AM. After this incident, some from No Limit would say that they were CPDK, a trend that surely would worry the police at the time. But sadly, the loss of Zale would be followed by the murder of another beloved member from the Muskegon Boys, as on April 12th, 2010, 19-year-old Faison Robinson, known as G Fazo to his friends, was participating in a dice game at the 2900 block of East 79th Street. At some point, apparently things went left, with gunshots being heard and the police responding to reports of a shooting. Once they arrived on the scene, they would find Fazo shot in the back, taking him to South Shore Hospital, where he would sadly be pronounced dead. Fazo would be sorely missed by his friends in the No Limit Muskegon Boys, with the likes of G Herbo going on to shout out Fazo countless times in his songs. He would also name his popular 2014 debut mixtape Welcome to Fazo Land, as well as popularizing a trend of referring to white Nike Air Forces as G Fazos in his honor. This is something that future pop sensation Juice WRLD would do in some of his songs, with this apparently coming from the fact that Fazo himself was a huge fan of the popular Nike sneaker silhouette. No arrests were made following G Fazo's killing, but many believe that the killing was the result of the ongoing beef with Lakeside. Following his passing, images of G Fazo would circulate with the caption Lakeside Killer, suggesting that perhaps before his death he had indeed played a role in violence against Lakeside, possibly attracting retaliation. However, others that are closer to Fazo would suggest that his death at the dice game was nothing to do with the ongoing feud, but regardless of who was responsible, it's believed that Faison was a top member of the Muskegon Boys, leading to their enemies in Lakeside taking advantage of this loss and beginning to target Fazo's friends.
dying at a young age, 18, 19, 17, 16. It's crazy, bro. Sometimes 15, 14, bro.
And family.
Crazy.
Exactly a year after Fazo's death, a memorial barbecue in celebration of his life was held at 79th and Escanaba Avenue. Here, Fazo's family and friends would be gathered on the block when a car pulled up, slowing down, rolling down the window, and someone inside opening fire. 4 grown men and a 10-year-old boy would be hit, but fortunately no deaths were recorded. Sadly, this was just another example.
That's not cool, bro. Shooting up a funeral? Nah, that's not cool. I don't give a nobody.
Of how ruthless the shooters in this story were willing to get. And from here, naturally, things would continue to escalate and blood would continue to spill between these two warring groups. Violence between the No Limit Muskegon boys and their enemies continued in Terrortown throughout 2011. On June the 3rd, Boss Blizz, real name Randall Cummings, an older figure in the No Limit community, and allegedly the father of Faro from No Limit, who would have only been 7 years old at the time, would be shot multiple times, being found lying dead at 6801 South Crandon Avenue. Witnesses say that after an argument, a silver car fled the scene, with this happening just down the road from a police station, with the police themselves even hearing the gunshots. Now, popular Chicago drill documentary channel Chicago Scene 88 has suggested that the alleged shooter in this crime was KTS Rio from Pockettown, and if Chicago Scene 88's research is to be believed, No Limit would hold a near decade-long grudge against Rio for this incident. But sadly, only days after that incident, another of No Limit's enemies would end up losing their life. Hakeem Graham, a 20-year-old with suspected ties to Black Mob, was shot multiple times and killed on June the 6th, 2011. And then another suspected affiliate of Black Mob was gunned down on November the 1st, 2011 at 7:45 in the morning at the bus stop at the 2400 block of East 75th Street. 18-year-old Rayvon Martin was shot in the back of the head, execution style, as a bus approached. 2011 was a bloody year in Terrortown, but things would only escalate further in 2012 when one of the most bloody incidents in this story took place on the streets of Chicago. On February the 19th, 2012, just before 7 p.m, Lakeside members had driven through No Limit territory looking for their ops. At this point, they apparently spotted a large group of No Limit members standing outside of a liquor store on the 2500 block of East 79th Street, at the intersection with Essex Avenue. A shooter in a beige vehicle allegedly leaned out the car, opening fire at the group with an automatic weapon with an extended clip. 5 people were injured in the shooting but survived, including a 14-year-old, but 2 people would sadly lose their lives at the scene. A 53-year-old by the name of Gregory Glindsey, also known as Alamo, and a 19-year-old by the name of Jamal Harris, also known as Rock. Despite causing numerous injuries, the KTS shooters from Lakeside didn't break the spirits of the No Limit soldiers. Going forward, they would openly honor their fallen friend Rock, beginning to refer to their territory in Terrortown as Rock Block. Rock is actually the reason that you'll hear the likes of G Herbo and others frequently referring to where they're from as Rock Block, and Herbo himself would go on to honor Rock in many songs. KTS Von, heavily rumored to have been involved with the shooting, would mock Rock's death on Instagram, posting an image of Rock's headstone with a gun and pow emoji. Others affiliated with KTS would later take to social media to mock No Limit's losses and bait them to retaliate. But sadly, the violence was still just escalating from here. 6 months later, on August the 23rd, 2012, another mass shooting targeting No Limit members would leave another 8 people injured, with this incident taking place on the 7800 block of South Essex Avenue, only a block away from the previous mass shooting that claimed the lives of Rock and Alamo. Alamo. According to police, 2 people opened fire from a moving car around 9:15 p.m. 8 people would be shot in this drive-by, with the news reporting victims from ages 14 to 28. A 28-year-old man was shot in the knee, a 16-year-old boy shot in the foot, another 16-year-old boy shot in the leg, a 20-year-old man shot in the leg, a 14-year-old shot in the arm, a 15-year-old shot in the neck, and a 19-year-old woman shot in the arm. The day
Said from 14 to 28, you got 14-year-olds and they getting shot.
after this shooting, Cairo from No Limit would tweet, telling the world that he was in pain. G Herbo was also one of the individuals targeted in these incidents, with Herb later opening up in interviews about being in the shooting that hit 8 people, including his 13-year-old cousin.
It was kind of big. It was like 8 of us got shot. Me, my younger cousin. My cousin was like 13.
Apparently at one point Herbo himself was shot in the foot, and apparently at one point a bullet passed through his hat, narrowly missing his head.
I got hit actually in the foot, like it was minor. The bullet went like through my hat, like I had my head on like on some Swiss Beats type shit. A lot of leg shots and stuff like that.
After the shooting, G Herbo and G Pharaoh would go back and forth on Twitter arguing over who had the worst lower body injury from the shootout, with Pharaoh himself claiming to have taken multiple bullets to the leg. Meanwhile, Ramo from No Limit would tweet, telling his comrades from Rock Block to get well soon. This enormous wave of shootings shocked the Chicago community, with the Chicago Sun-Times posting a provocative cover story with an enormous headline reading Terrortown and a picture from the scene of the shooting of a body lying in the street. Others reporting on the incident refer to a war between 2 factions of the Black Peace Stones, perhaps a reference to No Limit and Black Mob. And to make the story even more crazy, after that second shooting, according to police, a dozen squad cars were sent to a nearby motel where a car riddled with bullets and covered in blood was spotted after the shooting. An apparent trail of blood leading from the car into one of the rooms would end with a dramatic SWAT team raid that, unfortunately for the police, led to nobody being found, and the cops ultimately being unable to determine whether the blood belonged to a shooter or a victim that had fled the scene. As a result, in an effort to disrespect No Limit going forward, KTS Von would begin referring to them as No Limbs. And naturally, in retaliation to both shootings and the ongoing disrespect from the ops, No Limit members would hit the streets looking for revenge. In the days following the incident, G Herbo had tweeted about following the shooter, then going on to tweet that he had just got off the phone with his own shooter, telling them that he needs to see something on the news. And then 2 days later, on August the 27th, Herbo would tweet saying,
Auntie just called me like 3 people got shot.
that 3 people got shot on the 5, referring to Black Mob territory where Herbo's auntie lived, as well as firing off another tweet saying that his hitters are still in the field for him. G Herbo clearly went through a lot during this time, and his life in the dangerous streets of Terrortown as a member of No Limit meant that he could be the target of an assassination at any moment. Most of the No Limit members couldn't really say that they were safe in the streets of Chicago, but that very same month of the second shooting, a couple of young men from No Limit made the decision to try something different, making some music about the lifestyle that they were experiencing at the time, with no idea just how big their music would eventually become, eventually attracting millions of fans and a potential route out of the dangerous blocks of Terrortown.
Chill shit was hard. I've been baby bonnet rapping.
G Herbo had started out rapping, just recording little 60-second songs on his flip phone, and this was something he had apparently been encouraged to do by his fellow No Limit homie Lil Bibby. Lil Bibby and G Herbo met in a youth group that they were forced to attend in order to keep out of trouble, and after sparking up a shared love of music, Bibby would later take G Herbo to a studio on 79th and Duella to record professional standard music, with this experience ultimately leading them to make many songs together. Lil Herb, as he was known then, and Lil Bibby would have their first Chicago drill hit on August 5th, 2012, when they uploaded their song Kill Shit to YouTube. That song today has over 50 million views on YouTube and over 20 million streams on Spotify. Kill Shit was a breakthrough moment for No Limit in the rap game, and Herbo and Bibby would be putting their whole crew on the map. They had lyrics referencing the grimy life that they had lived in Terrortown. The track had Herbo rapping about how he knows people ready to do homicides. He raps that the gang No Limit are 30 years running and 30 years gunning. He shout-outs 150, another name for the Rock Block, which would become a frequent quotable in Herbo's music. Bibby would show love to Rock on the track.
It's crazy. Oh. It's crazy how you can do something and you really don't know if you're going, if that's going to do for you, but it does.
and vowing to shoot at his ops, claiming his affiliation to No Limit in numerous lyrics, and dropping bars where he claims that he will shoot their ops off of their porches. Bibby even goes as far as to say RIP the police, and saying that his team are cop killers, perhaps an earlier reference to No Limit members claiming to be CPDK after the death of Zale. These violent and grimy rap verses, combined with a banging 2012 era Chicago drill beat, cemented Kill Shit as a hit. One of the founding tracks of the Chicago drill movement, which up until that point in 2012 had been dominated by Black Disciple rappers like Chief Keef. The success of Kill Shit would bring a taste of legitimate passive income to the young members of the No Limit crew, with the rap game emerging as one of the first opportunities to break the cycle and see some success outside of the dangerous streets of Terrortown. Some would be able to get out that way, but others might not be able to take the same route. And so, in spite of
Hey man, we're gonna be Actually, no, let's finish it.
positive signs in music, the remainder of 2012 would be incredibly rough for the No Limit Muskegon boys, as they would continue to be targeted by rivals, with one particular exchange of violence being captured on video and being immortalized forever as one of the most haunting moments in Chicago drill history.
Hey man, look, getting good. Got to know lacking in McDonald's. I already know about that, man. Hey, but look, man. I think this was part 3. I think, right? This video right here, I'm doing this part 3, right? Yeah, this is part 3. Part 4. Part 4 will be out tomorrow, maybe today too. I don't know. I'll see. See you guys until next video.